What I want to get to is the preliminary report shows that there were a lot of misidentifications on what was occurring in the aircraft and misapplications of safety procedures and training in itself. And as a pilot, I want you to talk to us as a pilot. Can you provide us some context as to what actions or inactions by the pilots or the airline, for that matter, also require some close examination in the course of this investigation?
Yes, sir. Thank you for that question. As a pilot, I mentioned a little bit earlier that in the U.S., training focuses on hand flying, manual flying. There are other parts of the world and other countries that focus on flight control management. But in the U.S., from the first training you do as a pilot, Air Force for me, but it's the same in civil, it's flying the aircraft. And what was going on, it's already been pointed out that there was a false indication of a stall, immediately recognizable to the trained pilot as a false indication because one yoke was shaking, the other wasn't. What concerns me about the data from the flight data recorder is the apparent lack of recognition of runaway stab trim. Runaway stab trim is taught at the earliest stages of aircraft that have stab trim motors. And it is so important, to Chairman DeFazio's point about elapsed time, it's so important that you don't pull out a checklist, you don't open and look at what next. It's memorized and you're tested on it all the time, and you turn off those stab trim motors. In the Lion Air accident, it's significant that even though the airplane was pitching against the pilot's commands, that's classic runaway stab trim, the stab trim motors in 13 minutes were never turned off. And I think you made the point, sir, in your remarks that in the case of the Ethiopian Air flight, they did turn them off, although they didn't adhere to the emergency AD that we put out on November 8th. They did turn the stab trims off, but they never controlled their airspeed, and then subsequently, about a minute before the end of the flight, they turned them back on. Both of those things are unfortunate, obviously, and I have to point out, in deference to a colleague here to my left, Chairman Sumwell, these investigations are ongoing. And as you said, there are so many pieces to any accident. I've never looked at an accident where there weren't 3 or 4 or 5 links of the chain, any one of which, if it hadn't gone wrong, the plane would have survived. So we know that there's going to be, and there are, factors. But as a pilot, as you asked me, that's what I saw. The lack of control on the speed on Ethiopian, and the inability, the apparent not doing the stab trim cutout switch procedure.
We